Hi, and welcome to Riffs on Writing, where we answer your writing and publishing questions in 10 minutes or less. Today, we are on with one of our authors, Brian Talarczyk, who has just come out with his new book, I Am Not Bipolar. Can you see it? There we go. So welcome, Brian. And I forgot to introduce Andy, who's my partner in crime.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, we are so excited about your book, Brian. We're so glad you're here. So our first question for you is, why do you write? And in this case, it might be, why did you write this book in particular?
Yes, the two answers are the same, I would say. Is a lot of my the writing of my memoir about my mental illness is derived out of a journal I had kept over many years that was used to deal with some of the PTSD disturbances that I had as a result of some of my bipolar experiences. Bipolar disorder that is prone to psychosis and some challenges that occurred there. So my writing really, I took those notes as a starting point, my personal journal, and kind of over the years elaborated on them. And so my writing truly is about trying to process a lot of things that happened with me, and now at a point trying to craft them in a way that others can relate to them. So not just a personal journal, but more my story and how I dealt with my mental illness over the years.
Are you working on anything new or thinking about writing something else?
What I'm doing right now, I guess the answer is no. In terms of actually writing, I wrote for a long time, and now I didn't read a lot. In fact, I purposely didn't read memoirs about mental illness and specifically bipolar disorder because I didn't want them to interfere with just kind of the communication and, with trying to get to the reader that I was trying to get to without somebody else's story intermixed, somebody else's voice intermixed, that kind of thing. So right now I'm not writing, I'm reading and going back and reading other people's recollections of that. I'm also reading a lot about just the mental health movement in general, and what things like the smartphone, have done to our society, and just kind of thinking through just mental health in general and advocacy that I want to get involved with. So something next might come out of that if I feel like I have something interesting to say, but I don't know what that might be.
Very good. Well, so a lot of people are always interested in where writers write, like what their workspace is like. So could you talk about yours for us?
Sure. I learned long ago that I cannot write outside of between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning. Like once my day goes to, I'm a parent, so once my day goes to driving the kids to school and I'm self-employed, going to work and doing all those things, kind of mixing in writing does not happen unless I have a full day off. And like the full day off is a different time where I can kind of devote there. So the majority of my writing has occurred in the morning with a cup of coffee when everybody, including our dog, is asleep upstairs, and I have time within the house to just be quiet with my thoughts and even read out loud something I wrote if I want to, that kind of thing. So that's kind of that's been my process. And then throughout the day, I do have ideas like, oh, the next paragraph would be this, or the segment would be that. And so I just email myself a note, or I jot a note into my phone or whatever. And then the next morning I come back to it. And but I typically don't write other than that time.
That's super smart, though, to have a system to capture that stuff without sort of feeling like you have to write into it at that moment and disrupt the rest of your day. That's super smart.
Part of it's trial and error, I think. I remember reading some things I wrote at 9 o'clock at night. I felt inspired, and then I woke up at 5 o'clock next morning and was like, no, we're not. That's just got to get thrown away. That was not what were you thinking? You should have been getting ready for that.
Try those 3 a.m. notes when you're like, apparently don't even know how to spell, but that's great.
Yes, mine says something like
thoughts. Yeah, some of them are good thoughts, right? You're like, wow, that's a great creative thought. So I learned over time, just leave it in that space. Just write some stream of consciousness to yourself. But then when you go to actually write, just wait.
Yeah, super smart, super smart.
So this is, people either love this question or hate this question, but what's the one piece of advice that you wish you were giving when you were just starting out?
Good question. I don't think I either love it or hate it. I think it's a good question.
Neutral.
Yeah, I think for me, being a first-time author, the entire writing process was like one ginormous experience. And I think the biggest thing for me is I kept looking at the book as a series of revisions, and I wrote the book over the course of like 10 years. And I didn't want to publish it until I got it to a point where I said, this is what I'm trying to say and when I'm trying to say it. And in that 10 years, I got married. I had 2 children. The book evolved because it's a story of my life based just on that. So I think the real lesson learned is before you are saying, you want to take it to a publisher like Mountain Ash and start the process of doing that, kind of know where the endpoint is going to be so that the process of publishing can be more efficient. And in some ways you don't, frustrate your editors and whatnot by extending the timeline. You both have obviously been great to work with, but that is probably the biggest lesson learned for me is somehow come to a point where you know what the end of the book is clearly before you start the march towards the actual publication process, because it just will go smoother for everyone.
Well, I'll jump in there to anybody who's listening, and just to say that that's really what a memoir is. A memoir is not an autobiography. It's not your entire life. It really is like a moment in time. So it's either theme-based or time-based, but that's because things, of course, change,
Yeah.
That's what happens. So, and life hopefully keeps going and moving on.
Yeah, we don't want the end of the book to be the end of your life. Like,
yeah, that
not great.
That would
not a good
good
combination.
Well, luckily I lived 10 more years to actually.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
For the readers, Ben's in a great spot now. So.
Yeah, it is not a dark book. It is a hard book, but it is I don't think it's dark. I think it has a lot of light in it, which is not always the case for a mental health memoir. So, yeah. All right, Brian.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say that was part of, that was really part of everything about it was to say, I'm 15 years past a lot of the turbulence that my illness, kind of brought forth in my life, the darker times. It doesn't mean I am cured from bipolar disorder. I have to manage my illness every single day, and I talk about that in the book. But I am on the other side of that, where there is a brighter look on things. I have so much more perspective on things. And like when I look at the cover of the book that we have, that to me is like just the brightness that's there. A lot of the memoirs of mental illness are dark. Go and just look at the covers of them on Amazon, right? And this one isn't. It is ultimately, I hope, a book about hope, and I try to interject humor and humanity into it, because that's how I look at my illness now. Yeah,
I think it's beautiful for that. Well, so one final question. Do you have any craft books about writing that you recommend, that you particularly like, that you found useful? Or were those not something that Caroline and we're talking, we don't necessarily read a lot of writing books, but some people do. So.
I mean, it's a good question. I think more so not for me. I think more for me personally, because this is my first time being an author. I've liked writing before. I haven't done it. It became more before, as I didn't read books about mental illness, but before I started writing and trying to find a voice and working with someone to help me do that, Carla Stockton, thank you if you're listening to this. I more compared other books that I liked the writing and how I thought the voice would kind of come across. And so one example of that is, Mitch Albom, writes kind of, his Tuesdays with Maury and, that kind of the little vignettes that are in there, like that really resonated with me, like a story within a story of what was happening. And so that got incorporated into the book, that structure. So that's just one example, but so I say no to your question, but that was the process by which I took in one example of that.
But that's valid. When I was writing my memoir, I think I read about 52 memoirs that year, different kinds, just to get what I liked, what I didn't like. So I think that's very valid. Sometimes it's hard to apply a craft book to your work, but it's easy to see what you like and don't like in another book.
The one other thing I would say to that too is it was a process of elimination of what I don't like. And I will say earlier on, when I did read a few of the mental illness memoirs, there was just a ton of self-help books out there, like the survival kits and like that kind of thing. And that is not what my book is. I don't feel like I can to be honest with you, tell somebody else like how it is to manage their mental illness. I think that is a very personal thing in everybody's situation, and their genetics and everything is very, very different. So I did go try to write the not self-help book. It's more like in my life, I made a bunch of decisions that I shouldn't have. It's the like what not to do book, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you what it is that you should do.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good description. You should use that.
Yeah, the tagline. If
that's
you're
right. What
diagnosed
not
with a
to
mental
do.
illness, if you're diagnosed with a mental illness, don't do what I did. That's
there you go.
I might incorporate that.
Right.
Thank you for being on our show. If anybody wants to pick up Brian's book, which we think you should, and we encourage you to do because it's a great read, even if you're not reading about mental illness, it's just a great read and a nice peek into somebody's life. You can get this book wherever books are sold or borrowed, and you can find it on our website as well as Brian's, and we will have links in the comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for everything you did to get this book to the finish line. So thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely our pleasure.